The gravel crunched beneath her tires as Emma Reeves brought her sleek black sedan to a stop in front of Willow Creek's only diner. 15 years had passed since she'd last seen this dusty farming town. 15 years since they'd cast her out. Frightened, pregnant 12-year-old girl carrying shame and secrets that weren't even hers to bear. Now she was back, no longer that terrified child, but a woman whose name appeared in medical journals and whose research saved lives. The town had broken her once. This time, she was here to break their preconceptions. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The spring air carried the familiar scent of freshly tilled soil and apple blossoms as Emma stepped out of her car. She smoothed the wrinkles from her tailored navy dress and straightened her shoulders, feeling the weight of every eye in the diner turning toward the window to gawk at the stranger. Only she wasn't a stranger at all. She was the ghost they'd tried to bury, the shame they'd tried to hide, the child they'd sacrificed to protect their comfortable illusions. The diner's bell jangled as Emma pushed open the door, the sound slicing through the sudden silence like a scalpel. 15 years earlier, she'd left Willow Creek huddled in the back of her uncle's pickup truck, tears streaming down her face as the only home she'd ever known disappeared behind her. Today, she was walking in through the front door with her head high and her doctorate degree burning like armor in her pocket. Conversation stuttered to a halt. Coffee cups froze halfway to lips. In the corner booth, Mayor Richard Thompson, the same man who'd pounded his fist on the Reeves kitchen table, demanding Emma be sent away choked on his cherry pie. Time seemed suspended as recognition dawned across the weathered faces of people who'd once known her as that poor Reeves girl and now didn't know her at all. "Table for one," Emma said to the stunned hostess, her voice carrying in the silence. "And I think I'll stay a while." Emma had rehearsed this moment for 15 years, imagined the shock on their faces, planned her triumphant return to the town. That had discarded her. But now that she was here, standing on the worn linoleum floor of Mabel's diner, where she'd once waited tables as a child, helping her family make ends meet, the victory felt hollow. These people had shaped her past, but they hadn't defined her future. That had been her own doing. 15 years earlier, Emma had been just another farmer's daughter in Willow Creek, a small agricultural community where cornfields stretched to the horizon and everyone knew not just your name but your business. The Reeves family farm sat on the outskirts of town, 40 acres of struggling crops and dwindling hope. Her father worked the land with calloused hands and a breaking back while her mother took in laundry to help cover the mortgage payments they could never quite meet. Emma had been a bright child, always with her nose in a book, always asking questions that made adults shift uncomfortably. "That girl thinks too much," they'd say at church socials, clucking their tongues as if curiosity were a sin to be prayed away. But Emma couldn't help herself. The world beyond Willow Creek called to her through the pages of borrowed library books and the occasional National Geographic magazine that found its way into her eager hands. "You're setting yourself up for disappointment," her father would say whenever he caught her reading instead of helping with chores. "This is your life, Emma. This farm. This town. The sooner you accept that, the happier you'll be." But Emma couldn't accept it. Not when she knew there were oceans she'd never seen, mountains she'd never climbed, and discoveries waiting for minds brave enough to make them. She'd been making plans, secret, desperate plans to escape Willow Creek after high school, to apply for scholarships, to become someone the town would have to acknowledge, even if they never understood her. Then came the summer she turned 12, the summer everything changed. The waitress approached Emma's table cautiously, like she was a wild animal that might bite. "Coffee?" she asked, her hand trembling slightly as she held the pot. "Please," Emma replied, studying the woman's face. Behind the deep wrinkles and graying hair, she recognized Arlene Miller, who'd once been her Sunday school teacher. The woman who'd taught Emma about forgiveness while later refusing to extend any to a frightened child. "Do I know you?" Darlene asked, her brow furrowing as she poured. Emma smiled, allowing the silence to stretch between them. "You used to." She finally said, "I'm Emma Reeves." The coffee pot clattered against the table as Darlene took an involuntary step back. "Little Emma? Frank and Martha's girl? The very same." "But you're—" Darlene caught herself, glancing nervously around. The diner where every ear was straining to catch their conversation. "All grown up?" Emma supplied helpfully. "Yes, people tend to do that, even when you send them away." The summer of Emma's 12th year had started like any other in Willow Creek. School let out in early June, and the children scattered too. Swimming holes and summer jobs and endless games of tag that lasted until mothers called them home for supper. Emma had been hired to babysit for the Prestons, who owned the largest farm in the county and whose eldest son, Matthew, had just graduated from an agricultural college back east. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Matthew Preston had returned to Willow Creek that summer with new farming techniques and his father's expectations heavy on his shoulders. At 23, he was handsome in the conventional way that made local girls flutter and their mothers plot wedding arrangements. When he smiled at Emma and told her she was smart for her age, she'd felt a confusing mixture of pride and discomfort. The Prestons had 2 young children, 7 and 5, whom Emma watched 3 days a week, while their mother attended church committee meetings and their father and older brother worked the fields. It was good money, better than the other girls. Her age made picking berries or selling lemonade, and Emma saved every dollar in a coffee can buried beneath her mattress. College fund, she'd labeled it in her mind, though she never spoke those words aloud. On a sweltering July afternoon, Matthew had come in from the fields early, sweat-soaked and smiling that smile that never quite reached his eyes. The younger Prestons were napping, the house quiet and still in the heavy summer heat. "You're a pretty thing," he'd said, standing too close as Emma washed dishes in the kitchen sink. "Too pretty and too smart to end up stuck in this town." "I'm not going to get stuck," she'd replied, edging away from him. "I'm going to college someday." "Are you now?" He'd laughed, but not unkindly. "And how's a farmer's daughter with no money going to manage that?" "I'll find a way," Emma had insisted, her chin lifting with the stubborn determination that would later carry her through medical school and residency and the cutthroat competition of research fellowships. "I could help you," Matthew had said, his voice dropping lower. "I know people. I have connections from school." That was the beginning. Small gestures at first, brushing against her in the hallway, compliments that made her squirm, offers of special tutoring that she didn't need. Emma had been young, but instinct told her something wasn't right. She tried to quit the babysitting job, but her parents couldn't understand why she'd want to give up good money from a respected family. "The Prestons are good people," her father had insisted, "salt of the earth. You're lucky they trust you with their children." So Emma had stayed, and the boundaries had eroded bit by bit, week by week, until the unthinkable happened. Afterward, Matthew had straightened his clothes and told her no one would believe her if she spoke up. "You're just a kid with an imagination," he'd said, and were the Prestons, he was right. When Emma discovered she was pregnant weeks later, the town had already decided the narrative. She was a troubled girl, a dreamer, a child who read too many books and didn't understand her place. The whispers followed her down school hallways and through church pews. She'd been precocious, flirtatious, asking for trouble. No one questioned why a 12-year-old had seduced a grown man. It was simpler to blame the girl. The town elders, led by Mayor Thompson and backed by Pastor Wells, had come to the Reeves farm on a Sunday afternoon. They'd sat around the kitchen table with Emma's parents while she huddled on the stairs, listening to them decide her fate as if she weren't even human. "This kind of scandal will destroy the community," Mayor Thompson had declared. "The Prestons are the backbone of this town. Their farm employs half the county." "But she's just a child," Emma's mother had protested weakly, already beaten down by years of financial struggle and social hierarchy. "A child who's brought shame to your family in this town," Pastor Wells had countered. "The Bible teaches us that sin must be addressed, Martha, for everyone's sake." In the end, they decided Emma would go to live with her mother's sister in a city 400 miles away. The official story would be that she was receiving special education opportunities not available in Willow Creek. The pregnancy would progress in secret, the baby given up for adoption, and Emma would stay away until the situation was resolved. No charges were filed against Matthew Preston. No questions were asked about how a 12-year-old had become pregnant. The town closed ranks around its own, not Emma, but the Prestons, with their money and influence and generations of history in Willow Creek. The night before she left, Emma had snuck out to the barn and climbed up to the hayloft where she'd spent countless hours reading and dreaming. She'd brought her college fund $73.28 and her most treasured possession, a dog-eared copy of Gray's Anatomy she'd found at a church rummage sale. In the dim light filtering through the slats, she'd made herself a promise. "I'm coming back," she'd whispered to the darkness. "And when I do, they'll have to see me." Now sitting in Mabel's diner 15 years later, Dr. Emma Reeves watched as whispers rippled through the room. The shock on their faces would have been satisfying if she still cared about their opinions. But she'd outgrown the need for their approval somewhere between earning her medical degree and publishing her groundbreaking research on childhood trauma and resilience. "Can I get you anything else?" Darlene asked, clearly uncomfortable with serving the living embodiment of the town's buried shame. "Information," Emma replied. "I'm looking for the old Preston farm. I understand they sold it some years back." The diner fell so silent Emma could hear the ancient ceiling fan squeaking overhead. Darlene's face paled. "Why would you want to go out there?" Emma sipped her coffee calmly. "I have business with the current owners, the Hendersons, I believe." "The Hendersons, yes," Darlene confirmed, visibly relieved that Emma wasn't seeking out the Prestons themselves. "They bought the place about 8 years ago, after the bank foreclosed." "Foreclosed?" Emma couldn't help the small smile that tugged at her lips. What happened to the mighty Prestons? Darlene glanced around nervously, but the hunger for gossip overcame her discomfort. "Matthew got into some trouble at college, improper behavior with a student," they said. "His father spent a fortune keeping him out of jail, but the legal fees and settlements drained them. They moved out west somewhere. Justice had its own timeline, it seemed." Emma left a generous tip and walked out of the diner into the bright spring sunshine. She hadn't come back to Willow Creek for revenge, though the news about the Prestons' downfall settled something inside her that had been restless for years. She'd come back with purpose, with a plan 15 years in the making. Her Aunt Clara had been a saving grace, a nurse who'd taken in her traumatized niece without judgment or recrimination. She'd held Emma's hand through the pregnancy, supported her decision to place the baby, a healthy girl with a loving family, and then done something no one in Emma's life had ever done before. She'd asked Emma what she wanted. "To help other kids like me," Emma had answered without hesitation. "To be a doctor who believes them when no one else will." Clara had nodded as if this were the most reasonable ambition for a 13-year-old from nowhere. "Then that's what you'll do," she'd said simply. And that certainty, that unwavering belief that Emma could rebuild her life on her own terms, had been the foundation upon which everything else was built. Emma drove through Willow Creek slowly, cataloging the changes and constants. The hardware store had become a craft shop. The old movie theater was now a community center. But the church still stood on its hill, white and imposing, and the school looked unchanged except for a fresh coat of paint. This place had shaped her, for better. And worse, it had broken her and inadvertently set her on the path to becoming who she was meant to be. She parked outside the sprawling Victorian that housed the town's only law office. The sign on the door read, "Jenkins and Doherty, Attorneys at Law." Taking a deep breath, Emma gathered the leather portfolio from her passenger seat and walked. Inside, the receptionist, a young woman Emma didn't recognize, looked up with the practiced smile of someone paid to be pleasant. "Can I help you?" "I have an appointment with Mr. Jenkins, Dr. Emma Reeves." The woman's eyes widened slightly. News traveled fast in small towns, but her professionalism held. "Of course, Dr. Reeves. He's expecting you." Walter Jenkins had been Willow Creek's only attorney when Emma was a child. Now in his 70s, he'd added a partner but lost none of his sharp intelligence. He stood as Emma entered his office, extending a hand across his cluttered desk. "Dr. Reeves," he sighed, emphasizing her title with what sounded like genuine respect. "When you called, I must admit I was intrigued. It's not often that former residents return with such specific intentions." Emma placed her portfolio on his desk. "I've always been specific in my intentions, Mr. Jenkins. It's one of the qualities that served me well." "Indeed." He gestured for her to sit. "And now you want to buy the old Henderson place, formerly the Preston farm. May I ask why?" "You may ask," Emma replied with a small smile. "But I think the more relevant question is whether the Hendersons are willing to sell to me at the price I'm offering." Jenkins opened the portfolio, and his eyebrows rose as he examined the documents inside. "This is substantially above market value, I'm aware. And the purpose?" Emma leaned forward, meeting his gaze directly. "I'm establishing a summer medical program for rural children interested in healthcare careers. The farm has exactly the acreage and facilities I need after some renovation." Jenkins removed his glasses, polishing them thoughtfully. "You're creating opportunities for local children that weren't available to you." "I'm creating the opportunity I needed when I was 12 years old," Emma corrected him. "A safe place to learn, to dream, and to be believed." The old lawyer studied her for a long moment. "You know, I never agreed with how this town handled your situation," he said finally. "I told Richard Thompson he was making a terrible mistake, legally and morally, but I was outvoted." Emma hadn't expected all eyes in Willow Creek, especially not from the generation that had banished her. "Yet you did nothing to stop it." "No," Jenkins admitted, replacing his glasses. "I didn't. That's something I've had to live with." "We all live with our choices, Mr. Jenkins." Emma's voice was neither accusatory nor forgiving. "Mine brought me back here to change things. What about yours?" The attorney reached for his pen. "Let's draw up an offer the Hendersons can't refuse." By late afternoon, Emma had set her plan in motion. The offer on the farm would be presented to the Hendersons that evening, and Jenkins seemed confident they would accept. She drove to the edge of town, where a small cemetery nestled against the beginning of the rolling farmland. Some ghosts needed confronting before she could truly move forward. Martha Reeves had died 3 years earlier, her heart finally giving out after decades of hard work and harder disappointments. Emma had sent flowers but hadn't attended the funeral, still too raw from their last conversation when her mother had called to say she was dying. "I should have protected you," Martha had whispered through the phone. "I've regretted it every day since. Why didn't you?" Emma had asked, the question that had haunted her through adolescence and into adulthood. "Fear," her mother had answered simply. "I was afraid of losing everything: the farm, our place in the community. I didn't realize I was losing something far more precious." Emma knelt beside her mother's simple grave, placing a small bouquet of wildflowers against the stone. "I forgive you," she said quietly, "and I'm keeping my promise. I'm changing things." As twilight descended over Willow Creek, Emma checked into the town's only bed and breakfast, a charming converted farmhouse, run by an elderly couple who either didn't recognize her or chose not to comment on her identity. She sat on the porch swing, watching darkness settle over the town that had once defined the boundaries of her world. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jenkins. "Henderson's accepted your offer. We can sign papers tomorrow morning." Emma smiled, feeling the weight of 15 years of planning and purpose settling into place. Tomorrow she would own the land where her childhood had ended and where now new beginnings would take root. She would transform the site of her greatest trauma into a place of healing and opportunity for other children. The girl who'd been sent away in shame was returning as a woman of power and vision. Emma had survived not just to succeed, but to change the very community that had failed to protect her. She wasn't here for revenge or even for vindication. She was here because sometimes the only way forward is to return to where you started and reconstruct the foundation. As stars appeared in the velvet sky above Willow Creek, Emma thought about the children who would come to her medical program. Bright minds from farms and small towns who dreamed of larger horizons. She thought about the safe haven she would create, where curiosity would be nurtured and vulnerability protected. And she thought about her daughter, now 15 herself, being raised by loving adoptive parents in a coastal city. Someday, when the time was right, Emma would reach out to her child. She would tell her the story of a girl who refused to let others define her worth, who transformed banishment into opportunity, and who returned to rewrite not just her own story, but the story of an entire community. Emma Reeves had left Willow Creek as a victim. She had returned as a force for change. And by morning, the entire town would know that the girl they had discarded had become a woman they could not ignore. The porch swing creaked softly as Emma pushed against the weathered floorboards with her toe. Tomorrow would mark the beginning of her new chapter in Willow Creek, not as the shameful secret they'd buried, but as the determined visionary they'd have to acknowledge. She was no longer defined by what had happened to her, but by what she chose to do with it. The road from banished child to triumphant returnee had been long and arduous, paved with tears and determination and the kind of resilience that can't be taught, but must be forged through fire. Emma had earned every step of her journey, and now she was exactly where she needed to be, ready to transform wounds into wisdom and pain into purpose. In the quiet darkness of a spring night in Willow Creek, Dr. Emma Reeves smiled at the stars that had witnessed both her departure and her return. The town had once broken her heart, but now she was back to heal its soul. The next morning dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming through the lace curtains of Emma's room at the bed and breakfast. She dressed with deliberate care, a charcoal gray suit that spoke of professionalism and success without being ostentatious. Today she would sign the papers to purchase the farm, the first concrete step in her plan to transform Willow Creek. As she fastened a simple pearl necklace, her Aunt Clara's graduation gift when she finished medical school, Emma studied her reflection in the antique mirror. The face looking back at her belonged to a woman who had fought for every achievement, who had transformed rejection into resolve and pain into purpose. She hardly resembled the frightened 12-year-old who had been whisked away under cover of shame all those years ago. "You made it," she whispered to her reflection, a ritual she'd practiced since her first day of college. 3 simple words that acknowledged the long journey from there to here. Breakfast at the inn was served in a sunny dining room that smelled of cinnamon and coffee. Emma had just taken her first bite of homemade bread when the elderly innkeeper, Mrs. Collins, approached her table with obvious hesitation. "Dr. Reeves," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "I hope you slept well." "Very well, thank you," Emma replied, gesturing to the empty chair across from her. "Would you care to join me?" Mrs. Collins sat down, her hands fidgeting with her apron. "I wasn't sure if you'd remember me. I was the school nurse when you were a student here." Emma set down her fork, memories clicking into place. Before she was sent away, she'd spent many lunch hours in the nurse's office, not because she was ill, but because Mrs. Collins had let her read medical textbooks and ask endless questions about human anatomy. I remember, Emma said softly. You showed me how to use a stethoscope. The older woman's eyes filled with tears. I've thought about you often over the years, wondered what became of you. When I saw your name in the guest book last night, I could hardly believe it. Yet you didn't say anything. I wasn't sure you'd want to be recognized, Mrs. Collins admitted. After everything that happened, Emma reached across the table to touch the older woman's hand. You were kind to me when kindness was rare. That's worth acknowledging. I should have done more, the former nurse said, regret heavy in her voice. When they sent you away, I knew it wasn't right. A child needs support, not banishment. Many people should have done more, Emma agreed, without bitterness. But I'm not here to collect apologies or assign blame. I'm here to build something new. Mrs. Collins wiped her eyes with a corner of her apron. The medical program for rural children? It's all over town already. News travels fast in Willow Creek. Some things never change, Emma said with a wry smile. What made you come back? Mrs. Collins asked. After everything this town did? Emma considered the question carefully. It was one she'd asked herself repeatedly during the 15-hour drive, from her life in the city to this place of painful beginnings. Sometimes the only way to heal old wounds is to return to where they were inflicted, she said finally. Not to reopen them, but to understand them differently. To reclaim the space as your own. After breakfast, Emma drove to Jenkins' law office to sign the purchase agreement for the farm. The paperwork was straightforward, the price generous enough that the Hendersons had accepted without negotiation. By noon, she was the official owner of 80 acres of farmland, a century-old farmhouse, and several outbuildings in various states of disrepair. Congratulations, Jenkins said as he handed her the keys. Though I suspect many in town are wondering why you'd want to put down roots in a place that treated you so poorly. Let them wonder, Emma replied, pocketing the keys. They'll understand. Soon enough. Her next stop was the local newspaper office, housed in a narrow brick building on Main Street. The Willow Creek Gazette was a weekly publication that had chronicled town events for generations. Emma had arranged an interview to announce her medical program officially, to control the narrative before rumors could distort her intentions. The editor, Sarah Winters, was younger than Emma by several years, a woman who had likely heard whispered versions of the Reeves scandal, but hadn't been part of the town's decision to send her away. She greeted Emma with professional curiosity, rather than the guilty discomfort most older residents displayed. Dr. Reeves, thank you for reaching out to us, Sarah said, gesturing to a chair beside her cluttered desk. When you called to schedule this interview, I'll admit I was intrigued. Your name is something of a legend around here. Legends tend to obscure the truth, Emma said, settling into the chair. I prefer to deal in facts. Fair enough. Sarah clicked her recorder on. You've purchased the old Preston farm, now the Henderson place, with plans to establish a medical education program for rural youth. What inspired this project? Emma met the editor's gaze directly. Growing up in Willow Creek, I experienced firsthand how limited the opportunities are for children with professional aspirations, particularly in healthcare. The nearest hospital is 40 miles away. Many kids here have never even met a doctor who looks like them or comes from a background similar to theirs. And you want to change that? I want to show them what's possible, Emma corrected. Children rise to the expectations we set for them. If we expect them to stay within prescribed boundaries, that's often all they'll achieve. But if we show them broader horizons and give them tools to reach them, there's no limit to what they can accomplish. Sarah nodded, making notes as the recorder captured their conversation. Your own journey from Willow Creek to becoming a renowned pediatric trauma researcher is quite remarkable. Would you share some of that story with our readers? This was the moment Emma had prepared for, the delicate balance between honesty and purpose, between acknowledging her past and focusing on her vision for the future. I left Willow Creek under difficult circumstances when I was 12, she began carefully. I was sent to live with my aunt, a nurse, who encouraged my interest in medicine. With her support, I excelled academically, earned scholarships to college and medical school, and eventually specialized in pediatric trauma and resilience research. "You're being diplomatic," Sarah observed. "The circumstances of your departure are part of local history, though rarely discussed openly." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Are you asking me to comment on the fact that I was pregnant at 12 cent? Away in shame, and the adult responsible was never held accountable?" The blunt statement hung in the air between them. Sarah had the grace to look uncomfortable, but didn't back down. "Yes, I suppose I am. Not to sensationalize, but because it seems relevant to your choice to return and establish this program specifically." "It's entirely relevant," Emma agreed, surprising the editor with her candor. "I'm creating the support system I needed and didn't have. A place where children are valued, protected, and given opportunities regardless of their circumstances or mistakes. A community where potential isn't limited by family name or financial status or past trauma." That's quite an ambitious mission. The best ones usually are. By the time the interview concluded, Emma had outlined her vision for the Willow Creek Rural Medical Education Initiative, a summer program that would bring medical professionals to mentor local students, provide hands-on experience and education, and create pathways to college and medical careers for rural children who might otherwise never consider such possibilities. "We'll run this as our front-page story in next week's edition," Sarah promised as she walked Emma to the door. "It's the kind of good news this town needs. It's the kind of accountability this town needs," Emma countered gently. "Sometimes the best way forward is to acknowledge the past honestly while refusing to be defined by it." The afternoon sun was high overhead as Emma drove out to see her new property. The gravel road leading to the farm was just as she remembered, winding through cornfields and past the creek where local children still swam during hot summer months. The farmhouse came into view around a bend, a 2-story white clapboard structure with a wraparound porch and peeling paint. The sight of it hit Emma with unexpected force, memories washing over her in waves. This was where it had happened, the violation that had altered the course of her life. This was where Matthew Preston had taken advantage of a 12-year-old girl and where an entire community had chosen to protect him rather than her. The weight of those memories threatened to crush her as she parked in the overgrown driveway. For a moment, Emma sat motionless in her car, hands gripping the steering wheel as she fought the urge to drive away. She had faced countless challenges in her life, the whispers of other students in her new school when her pregnancy began to show, the grueling years of medical training while working part-time to support herself, the competitive brutality of research fellowships where her rural background made her an outsider. But none of those challenges had felt as overwhelming as this moment, facing the physical space where her childhood had ended. "Breathe," she told herself, using the same grounding techniques she taught traumatized children in her practice. "You're not 12 anymore. This place doesn't own you. You own it." Slowly, deliberately, Emma got out of her car and walked toward the farmhouse. The porch steps creaked beneath her weight, the wood weathered but still solid. The front door opened with a protesting groan, revealing a large central hallway flanked by spacious rooms, coated in dust and neglect. The Hendersons had been using the farm for equipment storage rather than as a residence, and it showed in the emptiness of the spaces. Emma moved through the house methodically, envisioning what each room could become. The formal dining room would make an excellent classroom. The large kitchen could be modernized for nutrition education and communal meals. The living room would become a library and study space. Upstairs, bedrooms could accommodate visiting medical professionals who would serve as instructors and mentors. In what had once been the Preston family sunroom, Emma paused. This space, with its wall of windows facing east to catch the morning light, would be her office, her command center for building this new dream on the foundation of an old nightmare. There was poetic justice in transforming the very house where she'd been harmed into a haven for other vulnerable children. As she stood there, planning renovations and program schedules in her mind, Emma heard the sound of tires on gravel. Someone was coming up the driveway. Through the dusty window she watched a pickup truck park beside her sedan. A woman about her own age stepped out, surveying the property with hands on hips before noticing Emma in the window. Emma went to the front door, curious about this unexpected visitor. The woman who approached had the weathered complexion of someone who worked outdoors and the confident stride of a person comfortable with hard physical labor. "You must be Dr. Reeves," the woman said, extending a calloused hand. "I'm Olivia Chun. I run the construction company in town. Walter Jenkins suggested I come out to discuss your renovation plans." Emma shook her hand, noting the firm grip and direct gaze. "I wasn't expecting you today, but I'm glad you're here. There's a lot to be done before summer." "So I've heard." Olivia's expression was carefully neutral, but her eyes held a spark of something Emma couldn't quite identify. "Jenkins filled me in on your medical program. It's an interesting choice of location." "Is it?" Emma kept her tone light, though she sensed Olivia was probing for something beyond professional information. "For someone with your history with the Preston place? Yeah, I'd say so." Emma studied the contractor more carefully. "You know who I am." "Everyone in town knows who you are by now," Olivia confirmed. Emma Reeves, the girl they sent away, returned as the big city doctor with ambitious plans. "It's the most exciting thing to happen in Willow Creek since the tornado of '09. There was no malice in Olivia's tone, just matter-of-fact acknowledgement. Emma found it refreshing after the eggshell walking of other encounters. "And what's your take on all this excitement?" Emma asked. Olivia shrugged one shoulder. "I think this town owes you more than they can ever repay. But I also think what you're doing isn't about collecting debts. It's about making sure what happened to you doesn't happen to anyone else." The straightforward assessment caught Emma off guard. "You seem very certain about my motivations." "I was 10 when you left," Olivia said, looking past Emma into the house. "Too young to understand everything, but old enough to know something wasn't right about a child being sent away while everyone pretended nothing had happened. My family's farm bordered the Preston's land. I used to see you coming to babysit, always with your backpack full of books." Emma felt a chill despite the warm spring day. "I don't remember you. No reason you would. I was just the skinny Chinese-American kid whose parents grew vegetables for the farmer's market. Nobody important in Willow Creek's social hierarchy." "Is that why you stayed?" Emma asked. "Because you weren't important enough to escape." Olivia laughed, a genuine sound that softened the conversation. "I left for college, got an engineering degree, and swore I'd never come back. Then my father had a stroke, and someone needed to take care of my parents and the family business. Life has a way of circling around." "Yes," Emma agreed. "It certainly does." They walked through the house together, Olivia taking notes and measurements as Emma outlined her vision for each space. The contractor asked practical questions about budgets and timelines, occasionally offering suggestions for improving flow or functionality. By the time they'd toured the main house and outbuildings, Emma felt a tentative connection forming, not quite friendship, but mutual respect between two women who understood what it meant to forge unexpected paths. "I can have preliminary plans and estimates to you by early next week," Olivia said as they stood in the farmyard, watching the sun begin its westward descent. "If we start work within the month, we should have the main structures ready by early June." "Perfect," Emma replied. "The first session is scheduled to begin June 15th. Olivia nodded, making a final note in her tablet. Then she looked up, her expression turning serious. You should know that not everyone in town is thrilled about your return or this program. The Prestons may be gone, but they still have friends and relatives here. People who would prefer certain stories stay buried. I'm not here to dig up the past, Emma said firmly. I'm here to build a better future. If some people can't distinguish between the two, that's their limitation, not mine. Fair enough. Olivia extended her hand again. For what it's worth, Dr. Reeves, I think what you're doing is exactly what this town needs. Sometimes healing can only begin when we stop pretending the wound never existed. After Olivia left, Emma remained at the farm until sunset, walking the property and solidifying her plans. The barn would become a simulation lab where students could practice basic medical procedures. The old equipment shed would be converted into a small lecture hall. The fields closest to the house would be maintained for outdoor activities and team-building exercises, while the more distant acreage could be leased to local farmers to generate ongoing income for the program. As twilight settled over the landscape, Emma found herself drawn to a massive oak tree at the edge of the property. Its sprawling branches had provided shade for generations of children, including herself during those summer days of babysitting the Preston children. Standing beneath it now, she felt a complex mixture of emotions: grief for the childhood that had been stolen, pride in the woman she had become despite everything, and hope for the children whose lives would be changed by what she was creating here. I made it back, she whispered to the ancient tree, to the darkening sky, to her younger self who had suffered here. On her drive back to town, Emma's phone rang. The number displayed belonged to Dr. Rebecca Kim, her research partner and closest friend from the city. How's rural America treating you? Rebecca asked when Emma answered. About as expected, Emma replied, navigating the familiar country roads with ease. Shock, whispers, awkward encounters with people who remember me as a scandal rather than a person. Having second thoughts? Not even for a moment. Emma's certainty surprised even herself. Being here, seeing the farm, walking through the house, it's confirmed everything I've been planning. This is exactly where I need to be. Your determination is either inspiring or terrifying, depending on whether you're on Team Emma or not, Rebecca laughed. The research team misses you, by the way. Dr. Patel keeps staring at your empty office like a sad puppy. Tell him I'll be back for the conference in September, Emma promised. And remind everyone that this program is an extension of our research, not a departure from it. The data we gather here about rural medical education and childhood resilience will strengthen our next grant proposal. Always the pragmatist, Rebecca teased. It couldn't possibly be that you're following a personal mission that transcends academic research. Emma smiled into the phone. It can be both. The best work usually is. After ending the call, Emma realized she was hungry. She hadn't eaten since breakfast, too caught up in the day's activities to notice. Impulsively, she turned toward the center of town. If she was truly reclaiming her place in Willow Creek, she might as well face the most public venue head-on. The Harvest Table was Willow Creek's only proper restaurant, a step above Mabel's Diner in both atmosphere and menu. On Friday evenings, it was traditionally where the town's more prominent citizens gathered for dinner. Emma's parents had never been able to afford eating there, but she remembered pressing her nose against the window as a child, watching families celebrate special occasions amid white tablecloths and candle centerpieces. When Emma walked through the door, the hostess, a young woman with stylish glasses and a nervous smile, nearly dropped her stack of menus. Dr. Reeves, she stammered. Do you have a reservation? I don't, Emma admitted. But I'm hoping you might have a table available. The hostess glanced around the busy dining room, clearly flustered. We're quite full, but let me see what I can do. As the young woman hurried away, Emma became aware of the ripple effect her presence was creating throughout the restaurant. Conversations paused, heads turned. A few elderly patrons who had been part of the town council when she was sent away suddenly became very interested in their meals. "Dr. Reeves," a deep voice spoke from behind her. "What an unexpected pleasure." Emma turned to find Richard Thompson, still the mayor after all these years, though his hair had gone completely white and his once imposing frame had softened with age. He was the man who had led the charge to have her sent away, who had pounded his fist on her parents' kitchen table and declared her a threat to the town's moral fabric. "Mayor Thompson," she replied, her voice steady. "Still keeping Willow Creek on the straight and narrow, I see." He had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I understand congratulations are in order. You've purchased the old Preston place for some kind of medical program?" "The Willow Creek Rural Medical Education Initiative," Emma confirmed. "We'll be training local students interested in healthcare careers, providing mentorship, hands-on experience, and pathways to college scholarships." "Admirable," the mayor said, though his tone suggested reservation. "Though I wonder why you'd choose to establish such a program here, given your history with our community." Emma met his gaze without flinching. "Perhaps because I understand better than most what it means to have potential overlooked because of circumstances beyond one's control." Before the mayor could respond, the hostess returned, still flustered but professional. "We've arranged a table for you, Dr. Reeves. If you'll follow me?" Emma nodded to the mayor. "If you'll excuse me, I haven't eaten since breakfast. Perhaps we can continue this conversation another time." As she followed the hostess to a small table near the window, the very window she'd pressed her face against as a child, Emma felt the weight of every eye in the restaurant. She was no longer just Emma Reeves, the farmer's daughter sent away in shame. She was Dr. Emma Reeves, the prodigal who had returned not to seek forgiveness, but to transform the very community that had rejected her. The waitress approached with obvious trepidation, reciting the evening specials in a voice that trembled slightly. Emma ordered with simple clarity the trout with seasonal vegetables, a glass of white wine, and then settled back to observe the room. Gradually, conversations resumed around her, though she noted they were more subdued, more careful than before her arrival. "May I join you?" The question came from a woman approximately Emma's age, elegantly dressed with a confident bearing that suggested success. Something about her seemed vaguely familiar, though Emma couldn't place her immediately. "Please," Emma gestured to the empty chair across from her. "You don't remember me, do you?" The woman asked as she sat down. "I'm Catherine Preston Matthews." Matthews' sister. Emma felt the blood drain from her face as she stared at the woman across the table. Catherine Preston Matthews, the younger sister of the man who had destroyed her childhood. Emma remembered her vaguely as a quiet girl, a few years older than herself, always hovering at the edges of rooms, watching but rarely participating. Now here she sat, poised and self-assured, casually inserting herself into Emma's space as if the past were merely an awkward social blunder rather than a life-altering trauma. "I think you should leave," Emma said, her voice low and controlled. Despite the storm raging inside her, Catherine remained seated, her expression serious but not hostile. "I understand your reaction, but please, give me 5 minutes. What I have to say matters not just to you, but to others who might be affected by your program." The waitress approached with Emma's wine, her eyes widening as she recognized the tension at the table. Emma thanked her and waited until she'd retreated before turning back to Catherine. 3 minutes, she conceded, checking her watch demonstratively. "First, I want to apologize," Catherine began, her composure cracking slightly. "Not for my brother, no one can apologize adequately for what he did, but for my own silence. I knew what was happening that summer. I saw how he looked at you, how he created opportunities to be alone with you. I was 17, old enough to understand and old enough to speak up. But I didn't." Emma took a deliberate sip of her wine. buying time to process this unexpected confession. Why are you telling me this now? Because when I heard you'd purchased our old farm to create a program for vulnerable children, I realized I had a responsibility to acknowledge the past before we could possibly discuss the future. Catherine's hands were clasped so tightly on the table that her knuckles had gone white. I've spent 15 years trying to atone for my family's sins, for my own complicity through silence. Atone how? Emma asked, genuinely curious despite her lingering anger. I became a social worker, Catherine said. I specialize in child abuse cases, helping children who've experienced what you did find their voices and their paths forward. I work in Grayson County now, about 40 miles from here. The revelation was jarring, forcing Emma to reconcile her memory of the Preston family wealthy, privileged, untouchable with this woman who claimed to have dedicated her life to protecting children like her younger self. That's commendable, Emma said finally. But it doesn't explain why you're here tonight. Catherine took a deep breath. I want to help with your program. I have connections throughout the regional social services network, access to children who could benefit tremendously from the opportunities you're creating. I also have experience securing additional funding for youth initiatives. Emma studied the woman across from her, searching for signs of deception or ulterior motives. What she saw instead was earnest determination and what appeared to be genuine remorse. Why should I trust you? Emma asked bluntly. Your family destroyed my childhood and faced no consequences. Your brother walked away unscathed while I was treated like a criminal. Not entirely unscathed, Catherine said quietly. The pattern continued. There were other girls after you left, though the family hushed it up each time. Until he couldn't be protected anymore. His assault of a student at his college finally brought consequences: legal fees, settlements, ultimately the loss of the farm and the family standing. My parents moved to Arizona to escape the whispers. Matthew is in prison now for similar offenses in California. A complex wave of emotions washed through Emma: vindication, grief, rage, and a strange sense of relief that justice, however delayed, had eventually found its mark. As for why you should trust me, Catherine continued, you shouldn't, not immediately. Trust must be earned. I'm simply asking for the opportunity to demonstrate through actions that I'm not my family and that I share your commitment to protecting vulnerable children. Emma's food arrived, giving her a moment to collect her thoughts. The trout was perfectly prepared, the vegetables fresh and locally grown. But her appetite had vanished in the face of this conversation that was forcing her to reconsider assumptions she'd held for 15 years. I need time to think about this, Emma said finally. Your offer is unexpected. Catherine nodded, rising from her chair. Of course. I've left my card with your information packet at the inn. If you're ready to discuss collaboration, call me. She paused, then added softly, for what it's worth, Dr. Reeves, what you're creating here is exactly what this community has needed for generations. I just hope you can find room in it for those of us who are trying to make amends for past failures. After Catherine left, Emma sat alone with her thoughts and her cooling dinner. The encounter had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. She had returned to Willow Creek, prepared to face opposition, prepared to stand her ground against those who had wronged her. She hadn't prepared for the possibility of allies emerging from unexpected quarters, particularly from the very family that had been at the center of her trauma. The possibility that Catherine Preston Matthews might genuinely want to help, might have spent years working to protect other children from experiences like Emma's, was forcing her to expand her understanding of how people could change, could grow beyond the limitations of their families and their pasts. Wasn't that precisely what she herself had done? Emma ate mechanically, her mind racing. By the time she finished her meal, the restaurant had nearly emptied, the dinner crowd dispersing to their Friday evening activities. As she waited for the check, She noticed a teenage girl clearing nearby tables, glancing at her repeatedly with obvious curiosity. "Is there something I can help you with?" Emma asked gently when the girl's staring became impossible to ignore. The girl blushed deeply. "I'm sorry, Dr. Reeves. I've heard about your medical program, and I was wondering." She trailed off, suddenly uncertain. "Wondering if you might participate," Emma supplied. The girl nodded eagerly. "I've wanted to be a doctor since I was little, but nobody from Willow Creek becomes a doctor. My guidance counselor says I should focus on more realistic goals like nursing or dental hygiene." The dismissive advice was painfully familiar to Emma, who had heard similar limitations placed on her own dreams decades earlier. "What's your name?" "Zoe Miller," the girl replied. "I'm a junior at Willow Creek High." "Well, Zoe Miller, your guidance counselor is wrong," Emma said firmly. "With dedication and the right opportunities, you absolutely can become a doctor. Our program is designed specifically for students like you." The girl's face lit up with hope. "Really? When can I apply?" "We'll be distributing applications through the high school next week," Emma told her. "But consider yourself pre-approved. Anyone with the determination to approach a stranger about their dreams deserves a chance to pursue them." As Emma drove back to the inn that night, her encounter with Zoe lingered in her mind. That single conversation had crystallized the purpose of her return to Willow Creek more clearly than all her careful planning and preparation. She wasn't just building a program or reclaiming space from her past. She was creating a pathway for children whose potential might otherwise be overlooked or deliberately suppressed. She was becoming the person she had needed when she was 12 years old. The weekend passed in a blur of activity as Emma established the operational foundation for her program. She met with an attorney to create a formal nonprofit organization that would oversee the initiative. She interviewed local contractors recommended by Olivia Chun to begin renovations on the farm. She drafted job descriptions for the staff she would need to hire: program coordinators, resident advisors, administrative support. By Sunday evening, she was exhausted but exhilarated. The bones of her vision were taking shape, transforming from abstract plans to concrete reality. Sitting on the inn's porch with a cup of tea, Emma scrolled through her phone, reviewing the applications that had already begun arriving via the program's newly established website. Word was spreading beyond Willow Creek to surrounding rural communities, creating a groundswell of interest that exceeded even her optimistic projections. The sound of approaching footsteps drew her attention from the screen. Walter Jenkins, the attorney, was making his way up the porch steps, a manila folder tucked under his arm. "Working on a Sunday, Mr. Jenkins?" Emma asked, gesturing to the empty rocking chair beside her. "I thought that was against the small-town code." The elderly lawyer settled into the chair with a smile. "Some matters don't observe the traditional day of rest, Dr. Reeves. May I?" He indicated the folder. "Of course." Jenkins opened the folder, revealing a stack of legal documents. "I've been doing some research since our meeting about the farm purchase. Something about the property transfer from the Prestons to the bank didn't sit right with me." Emma set down her tea, suddenly alert. "What did you find?" "Irregularities in the foreclosure process," Jenkins said, tapping the papers. "The bank that handled the Preston foreclosure cut several corners, likely because of Matthew Preston's legal troubles. They wanted to distance themselves quickly from the family name." "How does that affect my purchase?" "It doesn't invalidate it," Jenkins assured her. "The Henderson sale to you is perfectly sound. But it does mean there may be assets connected to the property that weren't properly accounted for in the foreclosure financial accounts. Insurance policies, potentially. Even trust funds established for the maintenance of the farm." Emma leaned forward, interest piqued. "And those assets would now belong to me as the property owner?" "Potentially, yes." Jenkins adjusted his glasses. "I'll need to file some motions, request certain records, but preliminary research suggests There could be substantial funds that legally should have transferred with the property. How substantial? Jenkins named a figure that made Emma's breath catch. It was significantly more than the grant funding she had secured for the program's first 3 years of operation. That would change everything, she said softly. We could expand the program immediately, offer more scholarships, bring in additional medical professionals as mentors. It would certainly accelerate your timeline, Jenkins agreed. But there's a complication. Pursuing these funds means potentially reopening questions about the circumstances of the Preston family's downfall, including Matthew's pattern of behavior and the community's response to it. The implication was clear. Claiming these funds would mean publicly connecting her current work to her past trauma in ways she had been careful to avoid in her planning. It would mean forcing Willow Creek to confront its collective failure to protect a vulnerable child 15 years ago. I need to think about this, Emma said, her mind already racing with possibilities and potential repercussions. Jenkins nodded, returning the documents to the folder. Of course. There's no rush on legal matters of this sort. They've remained unresolved for 8 years. Another few weeks won't make a difference. After the attorney left, Emma remained on the porch until night fell completely, weighing her options. The unexpected funds would be transformative for her program, allowing her to help more children sooner. But at what cost to her own carefully maintained boundaries between past and present? Monday morning brought a scheduled meeting with the high school principal to discuss how the medical program would coordinate with the school's curriculum and identify potential student participants. Emma dressed with particular care, knowing that today she would be entering the building where she had once been a student, where whispers about her situation had followed her down hallways until the day she was sent away. Willow Creek High School had been renovated in the years since Emma's departure, but the basic structure remained the same. As she walked through the front doors, she was struck by how small it seemed compared to her memories. The hallways that had once felt endlessly long now appeared narrow and ordinary. The classrooms where she had excelled academically while her personal life collapsed around her were just rooms with desks and whiteboards. Principal Garcia was waiting in the main office, a woman in her 50s with a no-nonsense demeanor and intelligent eyes that assessed Emma carefully as they shook hands. "Dr. Reeves, thank you for coming," she said, leading the way to her office. "Your program has created quite a buzz among our students." "That's encouraging to hear," Emma replied, taking the offered seat across from the principal's desk. "Identifying motivated participants is crucial to our success." "I have a list of students who've already expressed interest," Garcia said, sliding a folder across the desk. "Many of our brightest minds, who otherwise might never consider careers in medicine due to financial or geographical limitations." Emma opened the folder, scanning the names. Zoe Miller was there, along with 20 other students ranging from freshmen to seniors. Each entry included academic information, extracurricular activities, and brief notes about their specific interests in healthcare. "This is excellent, Principal Garcia. More comprehensive than I expected." The principal's expression softened slightly. "When you approached the school board about this initiative, I'll admit there was significant hesitation. Your history with this community is complicated, but your credentials and the opportunities you're offering these students are too valuable to dismiss because of ancient history." Emma appreciated the straightforward acknowledgement. Ancient history has a way of informing the present, wouldn't you agree? Sometimes in ways we don't initially recognize as valuable. "Indeed." Garcia leaned forward, her manner becoming more personal. "I wasn't in Willow Creek when you were a student here. I came 5 years ago from a district in Chicago. But I've heard the stories, read between the lines of carefully worded board minutes from that time. And what conclusions have you drawn?" Emma asked, curious about this outsider's perspective on her story. "That this town failed a child in profound ways," Garcia said simply. and that the child refused to let that failure define her future. That's a powerful lesson for our current students, said Dr. Reeves. What I hope some of them will learn through your program. The principal's unexpected support was like a foundation beneath Emma's feet, reinforcing her conviction that this work transcended her personal history. It wasn't just about reclaiming space or proving her worth to people who had once dismissed her. It was about creating tangible change for the next generation. Their meeting continued for an hour, discussing logistics, scheduling, and the selection process for program participants. Emma monitored these conversations but did not participate directly. Her focus remained on the program itself, selecting students, hiring staff, developing curriculum, and creating partnerships with medical schools that would provide pathways for rural students to access professional education. On the morning of June 15th, Emma stood on the farmhouse porch, watching the sunrise illuminate buildings that now gleamed with fresh paint and purpose. In a few hours, the first cohort of students would arrive, 30 teenagers from Willow Creek and surrounding communities, including Zoe Miller and the 5 foster children Catherine Matthews had recommended. "Nervous?" asked a voice behind her. Emma turned to find Olivia leaning against the doorframe, 2 steaming mugs in her hands. The contractor had become a friend over the weeks of renovation, her practical wisdom and unflinching honesty a welcome counterpoint to Emma's academic approach. "Not nervous," Emma replied, accepting the offered coffee. "Ready." "There's a difference," Olivia agreed, joining her at the porch railing. "You've built something remarkable here, Dr. Reeves." "We've built it," Emma corrected her. "This has been a community effort, whether Willow Creek initially wanted it to be or not." Olivia smiled at that. "Community efforts have a way of revealing who people really are. The ones who stepped up to help Jenkins handling legal matters pro bono, Sarah Winters running supportive editorials in the Gazette, Mrs. Collins organizing a welcome committee for your staff. They're showing their true character. And those who've opposed us?" Emma asked, thinking of Mayor Thompson and his allies, who had attempted to create bureaucratic obstacles at every turn. "They're showing their character too," Olivia said with a shrug. "Some people fear change because it forces them to question their past choices. Makes sense they'd resist." They sipped their coffee in companionable silence, watching the day brighten across the renovated campus. The main driveway was now lined with flowering crabapple trees, a deliberate choice by Emma to replace the memory of her frightened departure with new growth and seasonal renewal. "I should finish up those last inspections before everyone arrives," Olivia said eventually. "Want to walk through once more?" They toured the facilities together, checking that everything was in place for the program's opening day. The farmhouse's large kitchen had been updated with industrial appliances to serve as both a dining hall and a nutrition education center. The upstairs bedrooms had been converted to offices for the program staff, including a spacious corner room that served as Emma's headquarters. In the barn-turned-simulation-lab, medical equipment donated by regional hospitals gleamed under new lighting. Anatomy models, microscopes, and diagnostic tools were arranged on workstations where students would soon learn the fundamentals of healthcare. The former hayloft had become a relaxation and reflection space, with comfortable seating and large windows offering views of the surrounding countryside. "I can't believe this was the same place I saw 2 months ago," Emma marveled as they completed their inspection. "You've worked miracles, Olivia." "Just good planning and better execution," the contractor demurred. "Speaking of which, I should head out. Got a new project starting across town tomorrow." As Olivia departed, Emma's program staff began arriving, a mix of medical professionals, educators, and support personnel she had recruited from across the country. Dr. Marcus Washington, a cardiologist from Chicago who had grown up in rural Mississippi, would serve as the medical director. Sophia Diaz, an experienced educator with expertise in experiential learning, would oversee the academic curriculum. Together with 5 other full-time staff members, they would guide students through an intensive 8-week immersion in medical science and healthcare careers. The local welcome committee has outdone themselves, Dr. Washington commented as he surveyed the gift baskets that had been delivered to each staff member's accommodation collections of locally produced foods, handcrafted items, and personalized welcome notes. Mrs. Collins has been organizing the effort for weeks, Emma explained. I think she sees it as a form of atonement for the town's past actions. Interesting how communities process guilt, Washington observed. In my experience, they either deny everything or overcompensate with kindness. Willow Creek seems to be trying both approaches simultaneously, Emma said with a wry smile. Depending on which faction you're talking to. By mid-morning, the campus was buzzing with activity as staff made final preparations for the students' arrival. Emma retreated to her office briefly, needing a moment alone before the program officially launched. She stood at the window, looking out over the property that had once been the site of her greatest trauma and was now the foundation for something healing and hopeful. On her desk sat a framed photograph, the only personal item in the otherwise functional space. It showed Emma at her medical school graduation, her Aunt Clara beaming beside her. Clara had passed away during Emma's residency, but her unwavering support had been the bedrock upon which Emma had rebuilt her life after leaving Willow Creek. We did it, Emma whispered to the photograph. We turned it into something good. A knock at the door interrupted her reflection. Sophia Diaz entered, clipboard in hand. The first students are arriving, Dr. Reeves. I thought you'd want to greet them personally. Emma took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and nodded. Absolutely. Let's welcome them home. The driveway was filling with cars and pickup trucks as families delivered their excited teenagers to the program. Emma stood at the main entrance, shaking hands with parents and welcoming students with the warmth of someone who understood exactly how significant this opportunity was for their futures. Zoe Miller arrived with her mother, a tired-looking woman who worked as a waitress at Mabel's diner. Dr. Reeves, Mrs. Miller said, gripping Emma's hand with unexpected intensity. I don't know how to thank you for this opportunity for Zoe. No one in our family has ever gone to college, let alone medical school. Your daughter earned her place here, Emma assured her. Her academic record is exceptional, and her personal statement showed remarkable insight into rural healthcare needs. Still, Mrs. Miller persisted, most people around here don't get chances like this, especially girls. That's exactly why we created this program, Emma replied. Talent and potential exist everywhere. Opportunity is what's unevenly distributed. As the Miller family moved on to complete registration, Catherine Matthews arrived with her 5 foster children teenagers, ranging from 14 to 17. Their expressions a mixture of excitement and wary hope. Emma had reviewed their files thoroughly and been impressed by their resilience in the face of significant adversity. Dr. Reeves, Catherine greeted her professionally. Thank you again for accepting all 5 candidates. Their qualifications spoke for themselves, Emma said, shaking hands with each teen and welcoming them individually. We're fortunate to have them in our inaugural cohort. The last student to arrive was a quiet boy named Michael Thompson, who came alone in a battered pickup truck. Emma recognized him immediately as the mayor's grandson, though she had not made the connection when reviewing his application. Mr. Thompson, she said, extending her hand. Welcome to the program. Thank you for accepting me, Dr. Reeves, he replied, his discomfort evident. My grandfather doesn't know I applied. He thinks I'm working at the lumber yard this summer. The admission surprised Emma. That must have required some creative logistics on your part. Michael shrugged, a gesture that reminded her of Olivia. Some things are worth the complications. I've wanted to be a doctor since I was little, but my family says that's not what Thompson men do. We run the town or the lumber business. And what do you think Thompson men or women should do? Emma asked. Whatever they're called to do, the boy answered with unexpected conviction. Whatever lets them help the most people. Emma smiled, genuinely touched by his clarity of purpose. Then you're exactly where you belong. The opening ceremony took place in the converted lecture hall, with all 30 students seated alongside staff members and a small group of community supporters. Emma stood at the podium, surveying the eager young faces before her, and felt the full circle of her journey with an intensity that momentarily took her breath away. "Welcome to the Willow Creek Rural Medical Education Initiative," she began, her voice strong and clear. "You are the inaugural cohort of what we envision as a long-term pipeline for rural students into healthcare careers. Each of you was selected because you demonstrated not only academic potential, but also a genuine commitment to serving communities like the ones you come from." Emma moved from behind the podium, preferring to speak directly to the students. Without barriers, rural communities face unique healthcare challenges. Hospitals are closing, specialists are scarce, and preventative care is often neglected due to distance and cost. But you, with your intimate understanding of rural life and your commitment to these communities, can change that narrative. She paced slowly across the front of the room, making eye contact with different students. Over the next 8 weeks, you'll receive intensive training in medical fundamentals. You'll practice clinical skills, explore various healthcare specialties, and develop research projects addressing specific rural health concerns. More importantly, you'll build relationships with mentors who can guide your educational journey beyond this summer. Emma paused, considering how much of her personal story to share in this moment. She had decided against focusing on her trauma, preferring to emphasize resilience and opportunity. But these students deserved some context for why she had created this program in this specific location. "Some of you may know that I grew up in Willow Creek," she continued. "I left under difficult circumstances when I was younger than many of you are now. For years, I believed that my departure was the end of my connection to this community. I was wrong. It was actually the beginning of a much longer story, one that has led me back here, to create opportunities that didn't exist when I was your age." She noticed several students nodding, particularly Zoe and Catherine's foster children. They understood what she was really saying, that difficult beginnings did not determine ultimate outcomes. "This program exists because I believe in your potential more than I believe in limitations, whether they're imposed by geography, economics, or other people's expectations. During your time here, I expect you to believe in your potential too. Question everything, challenge assumptions. Imagine possibilities beyond what you've been told is realistic." Emma concluded by introducing the staff members and outlining the first week's schedule. As the students dispersed to their assigned orientations, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The farm that had once been the site of her greatest pain was now alive with the energy of young people whose futures were expanding rather than contracting. The first weeks of the program unfolded with the intensity Emma had envisioned. Students immersed themselves in anatomy lessons, physiology laboratories, clinical skills workshops, and medical ethics discussions. They shadowed local healthcare providers, conducted community health surveys, and developed research questions based on their observations of rural medical needs. Emma moved throughout this buzzing ecosystem of learning, alternating between administrative oversight and direct mentorship. She taught several seminars herself, focusing on pediatric trauma and resilience, her research specialty, and the area where her personal experience most directly informed her professional expertise. During one such seminar, 3 weeks into the program, she was discussing physiological responses to childhood trauma when Zoe Miller raised her hand. "Dr. Reeves, you've explained how trauma changes brain development and stress responses," the girl said thoughtfully. "But you haven't talked about how people overcome those changes. How do some trauma survivors thrive while others struggle their whole lives?" The question cut to the heart of Emma's research and her personal journey. She set down her laser pointer and considered her response carefully. That's an excellent question, Zoe. The research on resilience factors is still evolving, but we've identified several key elements that help trauma survivors move toward post-traumatic growth rather than remaining stuck in trauma responses. Emma moved to the whiteboard and began writing. First, having at least one stable, supportive relationship with an adult. For me, that was my Aunt Clara, a nurse who took me in after I left Willow Creek and encouraged my interest in medicine. She added another point. Second, developing a sense of mastery or control. Trauma often leaves people feeling powerless. Learning skills, excelling academically, or achieving goals helps restore a sense of agency. A third point joined the list. Meaning-making is crucial, finding a way to incorporate the traumatic experience into a coherent narrative about your life without letting it define your entire identity. For many trauma survivors, helping others through similar circumstances provides that meaning. Emma capped the marker and turned back to the class. Finally, there's the matter of choice. At some point, many survivors consciously decide that, while they cannot change what happened to them, they can choose how to respond to it going forward. Michael Thompson, who had proven to be one of the program's most thoughtful participants, raised his hand. Is that why you came back to Willow Creek? As a choice about how to respond to what happened. The directness of the question startled Emma, though she'd been moving toward this level of transparency with the students gradually. After a moment's consideration, she nodded. Yes, Michael. I could have established this program anywhere. But I chose to create it here because transforming spaces associated with trauma can be powerfully healing, not just for me personally, but for an entire community that needed to confront its past in order to build a better future. The discussion that followed was one of the most meaningful educational exchanges Emma had ever experienced. Students shared their own observations about resilience in their families and communities. They asked thoughtful questions about how healthcare providers could support trauma survivors more effectively. They connected personal experience to scientific understanding in ways that textbooks could never capture. By the time the seminar ended, Emma felt a shift in her relationship with these students. She was no longer just their program director and instructor. She had become a living example of the resilience principles they were studying, a concrete demonstration that trauma need not have the final word in anyone's story. That evening, Emma was working late in her office when she received an unexpected visitor. Mayor Thompson stood in her doorway, his expression uncharacteristically uncertain. Dr. Reeves, he said stiffly. I apologize for arriving unannounced. I was hoping we might speak privately. Emma gestured to the chair across from her desk. Please come in. The mayor sat down, his discomfort evident in every line of his body. For a moment, he seemed at a loss for words, unusual for a man known for his forceful opinions. I saw Michael today, he finally said. He came home to get some books he needed for his research project. Your grandson is one of our most promising students, Emma said truthfully. His interest in rural geriatric care is particularly insightful. He told me he's been lying about where he's spending the summer, Thompson continued. Said he was afraid I'd forbid him from participating in your program if I knew. Emma remained silent, allowing the mayor to find his way through this difficult conversation. He was right, Thompson admitted. I would have forbidden it. I've opposed your presence in this community from the moment you returned, not because I thought your program lacked merit, but because your very existence here forces me, to confront failures I've spent 15 years trying to forget. The candid acknowledgement was more than Emma had expected from the man who had been the architect of her banishment. That's understandable, Mayor Thompson. Accountability is rarely comfortable. No, it isn't. He met her gaze directly for the first time. Michael explained what he's learning here, not just the medical knowledge, but the principles of resilience. You're teaching. He said something that hasn't left my mind. Grandpa, Dr. Reeves came back not to punish Willow Creek, but to heal it. Emma felt tears prick behind her eyes at this perfect distillation of her complex motivations. Your grandson has remarkable emotional intelligence. He gets that from his mother, not my side of the family, Thompson said with a hint of self-deprecation. Then his expression grew serious again. I owe you an apology, Dr. Reeves. 15 years ago, I led this town in making a terrible decision. We sacrificed a child to protect our own comfort and convenience. There's no excuse for that, though at the time we created many. Why are you telling me this now? Emma asked. Because Michael has shown me that continuing to avoid this reckoning isn't protecting anyone, it's just perpetuating harm. The mayor's voice broke slightly. And because I want to help make this right, if that's still possible after so much time. Emma considered the man before her older now, humbled by his grandson's moral clarity in a way that years of professional ethics discussions had never achieved. She thought about the nature of transformative justice, about what true healing required from those who had caused harm. Acknowledgement is the first step, she said finally. But making things right requires more than words, Mayor Thompson. It requires action. What kind of action? Public support for our program, for one thing. Not just tolerance, but active advocacy with the town council and regional authorities. Financial backing would help ensure sustainability beyond our initial funding. And most importantly, leadership in changing how this community responds to vulnerable children in the future. Thompson nodded slowly. I can do those things. I should do those things, regardless of whether you forgive me. This isn't about forgiveness, Emma clarified. It's about growth. The 12-year-old girl who was sent away in shame needed your protection then. She doesn't need your apology now. But other vulnerable children in this community, they still need leaders who will prioritize their well-being over appearances and convenience. The mayor stood, extending his hand across the desk. Then that's what they'll have, Dr. Reeves. You have my word. After Thompson left, Emma remained at her desk, processing the unexpected encounter. The mayor's apology didn't erase what had happened to her, but it represented something she hadn't realized she was seeking: acknowledgement from Willow Creek that they had failed her, and commitment to do better for others in the future. She walked to the window, gazing out at the campus where students were gathered in small groups on the lawn, reviewing notes or simply enjoying the summer evening. These teenagers with their bright minds and open hearts were the true purpose of her return. They were the future she was building, not from the ashes of her past, but from the strength she had forged through adversity. The sun was setting over Willow Creek, casting long shadows across the renovated farm buildings. Emma watched the golden light transform ordinary structures into something radiant and full of promise. It was, she realized, a perfect metaphor for what she had created here, taking what had been broken and building something that gleamed with possibility. The pregnant 12-year-old girl who had been banished in shame had returned as a woman of vision and purpose. She had transformed not only her own narrative, but an entire community's understanding of responsibility, resilience, and redemption. Most importantly, she had created a legacy that would continue beyond her, a pathway for other rural children to pursue dreams that might otherwise have seemed impossible. As darkness fell over the farm that had once been her prison and was now her platform for change, Dr. Emma Reeves finally felt something she had been seeking since the day she left Willow Creek. Not forgiveness, not vindication, but the deep, abiding peace that comes from turning wounds into wisdom and pain into purpose. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.